policy. So looks like they're talking about immigration. Let's listen in.
You let him send people into the interior on planes, trains, and automobiles. Only God knows what happened, who's here. You sat by and you did nothing. And here's what I've learned about my friends on the Democratic side. They're never going to agree to deport anybody because all their proposals make it pretty much impossible to deport anybody. Body cameras, that makes sense. If you want to find out how to make ICE more professional, count me in. But your proposal is to require a judicial warrant to deport somebody. Can you imagine how many judges you would need if you got 15 million illegal people here to go get a warrant from a judge? This is not a criminal proceeding. This is an administrative proceeding. The president, as the Commander-in-Chief, has the ability to detain and deport people administratively. You don't need a federal judge. You're trying to create a mechanism so we will fail cleaning up your mess. We got elected to clean up your mess. We're going to hold ICE agents accountable if they went too far. Tom Homan went to Minnesota to turn the heat down. Great. Democratic politicians all over this country have been turning the heat up. You're wedded to lousy, dangerous policies. Senator Murphy, why don't you get Connecticut right with federal law? Here's what's happened. We got 12 sanctuary states, 200 plus sanctuary communities, 25,000 people. ICE has requested a detainer, ignored for 2 years. States have refused to work with ICE for 25,000 people that have a detainer at the federal level. Sanctuary city law is a magnet for future illegal immigration. Sanctuary city policies are full of fraud, like in Minneapolis. They bring out the worst in the system, not the best, and it breaks down law and order. We've been talking for weeks about you want to fix things. You're blocking a debate. I can't believe I'm here. I thought we were going to work together to try to find out how to reform ICE and also address the bottom line problem, which is sanctuary city law abuse. That's the problem, not ICE, not Miller, not me, not Noam. Policies that have been in place that entice more illegal immigration. Every Democratic senator turned the other way during the 4 years of Biden. You didn't do anything to bring reason to chaos. How many of you spoke about Lincoln Raleigh? Talking about children being abused. How many thousands of people have been raped and abused, stolen, and mistreated because of this invasion of illegal immigrants from virtually all over the world, with people from gangs, you name it. So you never talk about the victims. You just want to talk about TV in Minnesota. I'm all for these ICE agents being reviewed. I'm all for making them more professional. But I'm not all for stopping the mandate that President Trump was given, which is to deal with illegal immigration and the criminal elements therein. So I have legislation, it's S-3805, and it says if a state or local official does not turn over to the federal government an illegal immigrant who's facing criminal charges, been convicted or facing criminal charges, then that state or local official can go to jail. You have an obligation under federal law to turn these people over. Sanctuary states and cities, 25,000 ICE detainers denied. 25,000 people that should be deported have not been turned over to the federal government because of these 12 states and these 200 sanctuary cities. Let's get to the root cause of the problem. So, Mr. President, I'm going to ask unanimous consent that we vote on S-3805 that would make it a crime for a state or local official not to turn over to federal authorities a criminal illegal immigrant. Somebody's charged with a crime or convicted with a crime, and if you don't turn them over, you would face punishment. That will stop illegal sanctuary city policy. If people knew they would go to jail for breaking federal law, I think they would stop. You've had weeks, and we're not even debating. You're never going to change. If you want to have immigration policed, our Democratic friends will never be there for you. They turned their back on you and your family and allowed this nation to be invaded by 10, 15, 20 million people. Who the hell knows? We're trying to fix it. We're trying to fix it, and we're not going to give up. And until you change the policies, you never stop illegal immigration. If there are 12 states, Mr. President, that have sanctuary status, they'll keep coming. All they got to do is get to one of these states. It's magnets for future illegal immigration. It breaks down law and order, and it needs to stop. So, I ask unanimous consent that the Senate proceed to the immediate consideration of calendar number 318 S3805. Further, I ask unanimous consent that the bill be considered read a third time and passed, and that the motion to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table.
Is there objection?
Reserving the right to object.
Recognize the senator from California.
Mr. President, I understand that this is a very important subject for my passionate colleague from South Carolina, but also think there's a very fundamental misunderstanding, at a minimum, about what sanctuary policies are and what sanctuary policies are not. Now, as I was listening to my colleague, he's tried to paint a picture of sanctuary states or sanctuary cities as nothing but lawless. And I get that's maybe a favorite soundbite for right-wing media, but the fact of the matter is it's not true. Sanctuary policies do not mean that there are no laws or that the federal government can no longer enforce federal law in those jurisdictions. What sanctuary policies are is simply an affirmation that immigration enforcement is the job of the federal government, and that state and local authorities cannot be co-opted or forced into performing inherently federal responsibilities. It means that while federal agencies carry out immigration enforcement, state and local law enforcement will choose to focus their time, their energy, their resources on public safety in the local communities. So let me say that again, as clearly as I can. Sanctuary policies do not prevent ICE from going into any state or any city to arrest the violent criminals that the administration says they're after when they're being released from prison. And by the way, it's not like ICE does not know when someone is arrested. In fact, the federal government is notified every single time an individual is booked into a jail or prison. This means nothing is preventing ICE from picking up individuals when they are released from custody. But instead of prioritizing picking up the dangerous, violent criminals they talk so much about, what's ICE doing instead? They're out roaming streets in communities across the country and arresting people based on the color of their skin or the language that they speak or their perceived occupation. There's now a term for this, by the way. These are now known as the Kavanaugh stops because of Supreme Court Justice Kavanaugh, and by extension that majority of the Supreme Court sanctioning this practice. It's wrong. Now, I know my colleagues disagree with sanctuary policies as they are, official, technical. He describes sanctuary policies as, quote, killing this country. I've heard that a few times. And that by enacting sanctuary policies, leaders in these states are somehow, quote, openly defying federal law. Again, wrong. You can have your own opinion, but you can't own the facts. Far from defying federal law, courts have actually upheld sanctuary laws and policies. I'll reference just one. In the 1997 ruling in Prince versus United States, Justice Scalia wrote, quote, "The federal government may neither issue directives requiring the states to address particular problems, nor command the state's officers or those of their political subdivisions to administer or enforce a federal regulatory program. Such commands are fundamentally incompatible with our constitutional system of dual sovereignty." End quote. That sure doesn't sound like anyone is defying any federal law to me, and nobody's accusing Justice Scalia as having been a left-wing radical. And yes, we do have more recent examples of courts rejecting the Trump administration's attempts to strong-arm cities and states into acting as federal immigration agents. Let me just say this. These policies that my Republican colleagues are determined to attack are not the reason for the chaos that the American people have been watching in horror unfold in the cities of Los Angeles and Chicago and Minneapolis and so many others. Sanctuary policies aren't the reason why American cities and citizens are being pepper sprayed or tear gassed, beaten, unlawfully detained, or even fatally shot in broad daylight like Renee Good and Alex Preddy. What's endangering the American people's safety and security is an out-of-control administration that has empowered a masked paramilitary force of ICE and CBP agents to act with impunity, without accountability, without oversight, and without consequences. If we truly want to talk about public safety, then we need to be talking about reining in an out-of-control Department of Homeland Security, not scapegoating states and cities who choose to prioritize their local resources for their local public safety. So for the sake of the American people's safety and well-being, Mr. President, I object.
The objection is heard.
Mr. President, yes.
I recognize the senator
Thank you.
from
I'll
South
wrap
Carolina.
it up quick. Thank you, my good friend, Senator Padilla. Number one, we're going to have an election in November. Senator Padilla says that sanctuary policies are not part of the problem. I think they are. I think the American people believe that when 12 states refuse to cooperate with the federal government when it comes to enforcing federal law, they become sanctuary states and cities. It entices more illegal immigration. You know why we're not voting on my amendment? Because most people don't agree with him and they're afraid to vote. The only reason we're not voting on my amendment is because you'd have to go back and tell the country why you voted against stopping sanctuary city policy that is one of the biggest magnets of illegal immigration, leads to massive fraud and a breakdown of law and order. The parties are in two different places. Democrats, through Senator Padilla, believe that sanctuary policies are no problem. The Republicans, including me and President Trump, believe we'll never have orderly immigration until you get to the root cause of the problem. You got 12 very liberal states, 200 cities that refuse to work with the federal government to turn over people subject to deportation. I have an amendment that's being blocked that would make it a crime for a state or federal official who has custody of a legal immigrant facing criminal charges or been convicted of criminal charges